Hello, this is Wednesday, May 4, 2022. We are continuing from a discussion on redistricting and then an important work session on housing. So now we turn to council time. Beginning with old business, is there a motion, please, for approval of the minutes of April 27?
Motion to approve, Madam Chair.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? For lack of any discussion or objection, they are approved. New business 2.1, Vancouver Housing Authority request for mental health sales tax funding at Lincoln Place 2, or for Lincoln Place 2. And who is the presenter on this? Is this you, Kathleen, initially?
I can introduce, so we do have Vanessa Gasson on this morning from Community Services. I believe Roy Johnson is on, as well as, is it Andy Silver? Are you on? I just want to make sure. Yes, so I think they will be the ones actually presenting the information to council this morning.
So good morning, Council. I will go ahead and just introduce the topic. So I'm grateful that we were able to hear the presentation from community planning about the need for affordable housing. My department tends to focus on trying to address strategies to address the homelessness in our community. And part of that is trying to find affordable or creating affordable housing for very specific vulnerable populations. And so today, Andy Silver and Roy Johnson are going to talk about one of these housing projects. We have done a number of them in our community, and they are making a request because this will be focused on people that are unhoused, in housing instability with some behavioral health issues. So, Andy?
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you to the council for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Before I get started, I know it's been a busy day for you all, and it will continue to be one, so I won't go off topic, but I wanted to just quickly touch on, I think this is it's an interesting day to have this conversation after you've had your work session on the housing options study. And I would note that there is, I think, a very close correlation between that housing conversation and homelessness, and the homelessness that we see in our community. And I don't know if that correlation is very well understood by the community at large. And I think it'll be important when the council gets into controversial topics like parking and density. So I just wanted to note that and say that if there is ever an opportunity in the future to speak with the council on some of the latest research around these topics, we'd be happy to come back, or if individual council members want to have a more in-depth conversation, I am always happy and willing to do that. The topic for today, Lincoln Place 2. So as you may be familiar with, Lincoln Place is, which is located in the city of Vancouver, is a 30-unit apartment building that's what we call supportive housing, and it serves the 30 most chronic people coming out of chronic homelessness, so with complex physical and behavioral health conditions. And entry into Lincoln Place is coordinated through the Council for the Homeless and our coordinated entry system. And they use something called the vulnerability assessment tool, which was designed to actually sort of predict who would be most likely to die on the streets if not for an intervention. So when you think of the diversity of people who experience homelessness, when we're talking about Lincoln Place and what we're going to talk about today, Lincoln Place 2, we're talking about the people all the way to one end of that sort of spectrum who have the highest amount of needs and are the least able sort of on their own to care for themselves living outside. And that's due to both behavioral and physical health conditions most of the time. Lincoln Place opened in early 2016, and Currently, the Vancouver Housing Authority provides property management services there. We oversee the service delivery. Share, one of our partners, provides 24/7 housing support services and case management. We have partnership with CDM caregiving services, so to provide assistance with daily living activities for tenants who need them, such as help with personal hygiene, cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. We have a partnership with Peace Health that has, we have on-site home visits for primary care every week, and that includes the ability to prescribe mental health medications, and we have partnerships with basically all of the local behavioral health organizations and for treatment support for the tenants at Lincoln Place. The Lincoln Place model has been very successful over the last few years. We've seen over a 90% housing stability rate going on the third consecutive year now. And the Vancouver Housing Authority owns a vacant parcel right next to Lincoln Place. And we're at the point where it makes sense to expand this type of service for the community, this type of building. And that is what led us to being in sort of the pre-development stage for Lincoln Place 2, which would be a separate building adjacent to Lincoln Place, but would be connected so that we could have economies of scale in terms of 24/7 front door monitoring and those sorts of activities. So it's early in the design, but we are anticipating about 42 additional units. So that's additional to the 30 at Lincoln Place. You can see on your screen there the estimated total development costs. I will caution again, it's early, and those costs are changing rapidly right now, but this is sort of our best estimate today. And we will be applying for Washington State Department of Commerce Housing Trust Fund dollars for this project, as well as 9% low-income housing tax credits through the Finance Commission, the Washington State Finance Commission. But those funding sources alone will leave a gap, and that is why we are here today requesting some of the mental health sales tax funding, and so both to help fill the gap, and then also by having a commitment of local funding, it makes it more likely that we're able to get the state funding and the low-income housing tax credit funding. So I will pause there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilor Medviji.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to be careful here on, that I'm a real cheerleader for this kind of facility. When you first briefed me at the Council of the Homeless like 3 years ago, I thought, wow, what a vital and important service that we need to amplify. And so we are amplifying it. So don't take this as criticism. It's really a question. I am fully supportive of this. I want to see Lincoln 2 come to fruition, and if we need more of them, build more. When we exited 6 people in the last 2.5 years, that's great. But I want to make sure that we're focusing on how did we succeed with those 6, because I'd like to amplify that number and have more of a success rate. I know some people will be more challenging than others. And then in the following paragraph, the issue I have, maybe it's just with verbiage, and I'm hoping you can clarify this. You know, when we're talking about substance abuse and mental health issues, they usually go hand in hand. You know, where the statement is that we're helping tenants access sobering center, detoxification, or inpatient treatment when appropriate. You know, I'm always concerned about that because I want to make sure it's hard work. It should be an absolute requirement. No one with substance abuse issues should be voluntarily or not attending the detox and treatment services they need. It absolutely should be a requirement to be a tenant at one of these facilities, because we want to help them. We want them to be clean and sober and move on to more permanent housing. So can you tell me what are we going to do to improve our exiting rate? And also, what are we doing for those with substance abuse issues?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Medvedev, for the questions. So first on the positive exits, one, I would say that, the good news is that is an increasing rate at this point, although I hear what you're saying, that you'd like the number to be higher than it currently is. Before I talk about the services in place to accomplish that, I do want to note, again, the population served. So the population served at Lincoln Place would be, if you think of everybody experiencing homelessness in the community, the 30 households with the most acute disabling conditions. So schizophrenia, bipolar disorder with psychotic episodes, etc. So when we think about success, it's a population that may probably, not always, but probably will always need subsidized housing, but hopefully won't always need the level of on-site support that's provided at Lincoln Place. So the positive exit, so when we think of success, we think, one, of keeping people stably housed as success, and then two, what you're referencing, how do we get people to a point in their lives where they can be more independent and out accessing more community resources. And our primary way of doing that is the 24/7 staffing that SHARE provides, and very skilled staff that we have right now through SHARE that uses techniques around motivational interviewing, works on care coordination with the other partners to help people set goals that are realistic for them, and then achieve them over time. From the Housing Authority perspective, what we provide is, we say that if you've been at Lincoln Place for at least 2 years and you don't require the intensive site-based services anymore, we will allow people to transition to a housing choice voucher, where then they can still have the affordability, but can live out in the community and access services that way. So that's been our focus on trying to increase that number. In terms of your question on accessing substance use disorder treatment, Lincoln Place, so let me be clear, that is absolutely the shared goal. So the goal for anybody at Lincoln Place, or anybody in the future Lincoln Place 2 who has an active substance use disorder, the goal is to have that person be in treatment and to ultimately stop using whatever that substance is. However, we do not evict somebody from Lincoln Place if they are not accessing treatment and staying clean. Instead, we continue to engage them and work with them to try to get them to the point where they're willing to seek treatment. And the main reason for that is that if we didn't let people access Lincoln Place, or if we evicted for that, they would still be in our community, they would still have the substance use disorder, and they would just go back to living in an encampment. And studies have shown with this model that you're more likely, you have more success at getting people to get into treatment in this population if you give them the safety and stability of the housing and then work with them to engage with the treatment, than trying to get them to engage in the encampment before they move into housing.
And I would just like to add, for us to make these kind of projects work in our community, we need multiple funding sources. And so we have to tap into funding at the state, whether it's the Housing Trust Fund that's managed by Department of Commerce, or the Permanent Supportive Housing that the legislative just passed, and that is also at the Department of Commerce. Or if you even have the Housing Authority go into new market tax credits or other type of financing. This money at the state does have the requirements, and the focus is on the most chronic homeless with behavioral health issues, also with some physical health issues, but they want the housing to be low barrier. So you cannot put those kind of restrictions on the housing to be able to tap into some of that funding. And we just will not be able to make any of these projects work without having some of that funding be available. And what the local governments are able to do is make our projects more competitive, because we compete against all the projects across the state of Washington around this. And we have had great success, because special thanks to the County Council and the City of Vancouver, because they put their local dollars in, and we are competitive with our housing projects. And we have some wonderful service providers who come together and try to make the services work and be on site as much as possible. So I just would like to add that part there.
Thank you. And does that answer your question, Counselor?
I'm sending a separate email to Vanessa right now.
Okay. We won't ask you to
Madam
read
Chair,
it,
I have a
Vanessa.
couple of questions.
Go ahead, Counselor.
And this is for my education and background, so some clarifications. So you indicate that the model has produced a housing stability rate of over 90%. Educate me on what housing stability rate means.
Very great question. So housing stability rate looks at the number of people who remain in the housing development, so Lincoln Place, plus any positive exits divided by the total. So basically comparing the difference between 100% and whatever your rate is the number of negative exits. So people exiting to homelessness, or a place not meant for someone to live. So it's the primary way of analyzing this type of housing, where you're serving people with such profound conditions that the ultimate goal is, how can we as a society keep them stably housed?
So really it's the number of people that are staying with the program, sticking around?
Yeah, and including if they move out to a positive outcome, like,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, next, you have 6 positive exits in 2.5 years, and 6 positive out of how many?
Out of how many total exits?
Yes.
I think I can find that quickly if.
Okay, well, these are just things that pop up as I read through it. You can get back to me on that.
Okay.
Let's see.
And Counselor, I would say ballpark. So I know over the full 2.5 year period, the housing stability rate is about 91%. So ballpark, it would be probably about 3 negative exits in that time period.
Okay, and so has the program been going for about 2.5 years?
The program's been going for 6 years.
6.
And well, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just curious as how it's changed or not changed over that time frame.
Yeah, thank you. This statistic that I shared was part of a presentation we recently did to the Vancouver Housing Authority Board of Commissioners on that topic, because the beginning of Lincoln Place was not nearly as successful as it is today, and didn't have the same level of services and resources we've brought to it. So when you compare, this was part of a comparison looking at the last 2.5 years, where we have those service levels that I described earlier, versus the first 2.5 years. The first 2.5 years, we had a housing stability rate of 68%, and only 3 positive exits in that time frame, compared with the 91% and the 6 positive exits in the last 2.5 years.
Okay, so you've learned as you've gone along and you've gotten better. That's always a great signal. You note that there will be a decreasing operational cost per tenant, and the analytical side of me is just curious. At some point, I'd be interested in learning sort of what that translates to. Is it significant in the statement? If you're going to save a significant amount of money per tenant because you're doubling, in essence, the number you're serving, you don't have to get to me at the moment. It's just a question that pops into my mind, understanding how the wording translates to numbers.
Yes, on the exact number, I can get back to you, but I can tell you what's behind that is that a large cost in this type of housing is the 24/7 staffing. So the graveyard shift staffing, and that what went behind the idea behind how many apartments to add was after conversations with our partners on what was the total unit count between the 2 buildings we could get at and not need to increase the overnight staffing. We would increase the case management happening during the hours where most people are awake. So it's not that we would keep the same service costs, but by piggybacking off the overnight is where the per person savings comes from.
And one final question for the moment, at least, is the $2 million, is it an annual contribution or is it a one-time?
It is a one-time for the capital for the building and design costs.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well,
I have just 3 quick questions. The first one is, you said that there was this success rate of 6 of your residents going into permanent housing and 3 did not. Does that mean that the 3 went back into homelessness?
yeah, a negative exit is very likely to be homelessness or temporarily doubling up or something that's not permanent.
Mm-hmm. And tell me about the arrival of these residents on site. Were they willing participants to come to Lincoln Place, or what were the circumstances for them coming and arriving and being treated?
Great question. So it's a voluntary program. So and that is sort of how all of our housing works. So somebody has to choose to want to live in the apartment, sign the lease. Tenants pay a percentage of their income towards rent, so they're paying rent. Most, at Lincoln Place, usually that's Social Security disability income. Now sometimes that takes a lot of relationship building and engagement to get somebody to want to move into Lincoln Place. So that happens with outreach workers and the share staff building relationships with somebody. Often these are people who may have been in other types of programs in the past and it didn't work out and aren't, so when you first ask them, if you were to walk up to them, they might say, oh, I'm not interested. And then you really work with them over time and say, why don't you come take a tour? Why don't you meet the staff? And you get to the point where they're interested and they want to move in. And then there's, a lot of work that I think the first 6 months is really a very crucial time where a lot of the tenants have been living outside, sometimes for decades and might not have, using a bathroom, an indoor bathroom might be a newer skill based off of their life experiences. So there's a lot of work done around sort of helping somebody adjust to the apartment, to living in an apartment community where we expect different sorts of behaviors than one that might happen in an encampment. And then once that period sort of then transitions into the setting the goals of, around health and around income or education or whatever it is that person wants to work on to sort of improve their life further.
For this model to work, it sounds like the outreach coordinators, sheriff's office, and others would really need to be very familiar with your offering, or it would be difficult for them to sell the facility.
Yes, and that's part of the relationship with Coordinate Entry. So there is a community-wide list of people who have received this vulnerability assessment tool. It's called a VAT, and there are multiple agencies trained on conducting that type of assessment. So through coordinated outreach, those workers know both about Lincoln Place and that assessment tool. And so the first step is getting somebody to do the assessment. And then if their name rises to the top, we have the information of who did the assessment, who might have a pre-existing relationship. And it's always good to go to, rely on that first before trying to build something from scratch.
Very good. Well, and the last question, and this is for the benefit of those listening in. Your request is for $2 million of the mental health sales tax funds, as I understand it, on a one-time basis. How much of your funding comes from the Clark County General Fund?
I don't believe any, as far as I know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's an important matter for many.
Yep.
Madam Chair, I have one additional question, and that is,
Yes, Counselor.
I noticed that they're applying for the 5 million and the 6.8 in the summer and the fall of this year. What if they don't get one or both of those grants? Is the county's 2 million? When do we pay that out? Is there any gateway or any contingency associated with them getting one or both grants, or do we go ahead and put the 2 million in, and even if they don't get the grants, they have the 2 million to use and work with?
Absolutely. So the way it works, so the reason we're asking now is because if approved, we would get sort of a letter of commitment from the county staff that says, assuming all of the other funding is acquired and the project is viable and the county signs off before financial closing, the county would commit this money. The money, we wouldn't actually access the money until 100% of the financing's lined up, all the parties have approved, and at financial closing right before start of construction.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments from council?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilor Olson.
just one last question. Kathleen, what is the balance of the mental health sales tax fund right now? Is it like 12?
I'll have to look. We have a lot. We have a very hefty fund balance.
17 million?
Yeah, because we have not spent it down at all during COVID. And we did provide, I think, $600,000 to the VHA for other supports as well. But there is a significant amount that the one-time commitment is doable, and the Mental Health Sales Tax Committee has already started reconvening and will be soliciting for other potential grants that we can provide, both internal and external.
Okay, thank you. And that was kind of the point of my question, is we have significant funds available. This is the type of project, I appreciate the questions too, to clarify Lincoln Place and what it's doing in the community, that this is the type of project that this fund is really set up to help support. So thank you.
And Kathleen, this new business item, what is the schedule for moving it forward?
I believe you can actually approve it today, and then we can move forward and conclude this agenda item.
I'd make a motion to approve.
And who was that?
Second. Was that?
Councilor Medveji.
Second.
Very good, thank you. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve the VHA request for mental health sales tax funding for Lincoln Place 2, $2 million. Please say aye.
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 Those opposed? It carries unanimously. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. And Councilor Baumann, I just want to address one thing you asked earlier in the earlier presentation work session about whether the RV that was being presented was part of the homeless strategy. So there is a committee working on the new homeless action plan, but that is really actionable implementation strategies that go into that plan that eventually come back to the county council for approval. So if for some reason there isn't policy or jurisdictions have some kind of code that doesn't allow for some kind of implementation, we do not put those into the homeless action plan. So, but if the county council wants to change something and have it considered to be part of the homeless action plan, we will definitely include that, but not until policy has been changed. So I just want to make that clarification.
So as it relates to the housing report that we received earlier, they're really distinct, aren't they?
I'm sorry?
As it relates to the housing report that we received earlier today, it's really distinct from the homelessness plan that you're citing now.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we are now ready to move to counselor reports. Counselors, do you have a report?
Madam Chair, I have one brief issue that I would like to bring to a council time, and I guess we need, I guess it wasn't formally put on in the record anywhere. I had a constituent veteran come to me and ask, you know, the state has recognized disabled veterans and allowed them to have a park entrance at no fee, and they issued them cards. The National Park Service has a forever card too, also for disabled veterans. And he was suggesting that why doesn't the county park system allow that as well? And so staff has been looking at this. It's almost impossible to forecast what revenue loss there might be. I think it would be minimal, but I would like to see that move forward. And also it would really take is an instruction to those at the park entrance to accept either the state disabled veterans pass or the federal park disabled veterans pass, and then allow them in. I think it would be an appropriate recognition, especially for those veterans who are disabled.
And that would be for a council time discussion.
Yes, and I think we should include someone from Parks and maybe even send it to the Parks committee. But I'd like to see it move forward if we could.
Does that sound doable, Kathleen?
Yes, so just for the process for the council time agendas, the process is that we have to have two counselors to put an agenda item on, which is why I think Councilor Mevagee is bringing it up today. So if there's support from the council to add this more specific conversation at a future council time, we can certainly do that.
I'll support that.
I'll support.
Very good. Are there other counselor reports? I would just like to state that Workforce Southwest Washington has been in need of a counselor as their representative. And I had the pleasure of serving in that role last year and enjoyed it very much, and have just kind of been hanging on with them during this time. But now our new counselor for District 5, Counselor Rylander, has agreed to serve. And the WSW has agreed with pleasure to accept him. Normally, we would vote on this. In fact, policy requires that we normally would vote. However, in this case, other counselors have been unable to serve. So, Counselor Rylander, congratulations and thank you for that liaison for you, and that will be your first one, but more to come at the retreat. I did not want to wait until the retreat because I understand that may be as late as June, given various schedules that are coming up for counselors through May. So we'll have our retreat in June. Are there any other counselor reports? Okay, how about work session requests? I believe there are none.
That's correct. There are no work session requests.
And Lindsay Schaefer, what policy issues do you wish to tell us about?
Nothing further from me today. Thank you.
All right. Well, we are scheduled for an executive session at this time. It is for 15 minutes. It is authorized by RCW 42.30.110, Section 1I. Council will be present with us. And Leslie, is there likely to be a report out afterwards?
There is no after action.
Okay. And is that, Kathleen, the only item for executive session today?
Yes, that's correct.
Very good. So we will be back. It is 11:36, let's say 11:55 to adjourn in about 15 minutes.
Hello, the council has extended executive session for another 10 minutes and will be coming back at 12:15. Hello, council is extending executive session for another 5 minutes and will return at 12:20.
For you.
This concludes our executive session for Wednesday, May 4, 2022. Coming out of council time at this point, the meeting is adjourned.